Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Shekarian, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Attorney from Shekarian Law Professional Corporation. Mr. Shekarian, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please begin.
Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee, hello and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to appear today. Backlogs and delays are not new to our immigration system. They have always been parts of it. And we have tried many things to solve the problem, from terminating 300,000 skilled worker application back in 2012 with no notice, no explanation, to creating the new express entry system in 2015 with the sole promise of eliminating backlog, which itself is now one of the main contributors to the problem. We have committed billions and have recently committed millions more to solving this problem, but it just keeps on getting worse. As a lawyer, I was trained to think within the limits of precedent. I was trained to think within the limits of what has been done before me. I was trained to think within the limits of a box. But I was an engineer long before I became a lawyer. And as an engineer, I was trained to approach old problems in entirely new ways. As an engineer, I was trained to understand that there is no box. And today, I'd like to encourage you to think about this problem anew, to step back, to zoom out, and rethink the big picture. Backlog is essentially a collection of tasks required to achieve a larger strategic plan. In other words, fix your strategy, fix your backlog. What is our immigration strategy? Today, it has been reduced to numbers. Just look at our official rhetoric. Look at our official announcements. In 2021, for example, we celebrated exceeding our target of 401,000 new permanent residents despite COVID. Our executives shook hands and took pride in being confident in setting even higher targets for the years to come. Of course, under this strategy, backlog isn't even a problem. The incumbent minister himself admitted so in delivering his keynote speech at the CBA Immigration Law Conference back in June when he said, backlog is a good thing. It shows Canada is in high demand. But Madam Chair, members of the committee, numbers don't make the future of our country. Our future does not depend on how many people we admit, but on who we admit and how we treat them, how we set them up to integrate and succeed in our country. How do we want to grow our Canadian family? Do we want world-class artists, athletes, and cultural figures who can expand our national horizon and inspire us to become the leader of the free world? No, because even if you have multiple Olympic medals, Academy Awards, and accolades and recognitions, you still need to submit tens of irrelevant documents, wait 41 months with only a 17% chance of success under the federal self-employed program. While you can choose the United States, show only your internationally recognized awards, and get approved in less than a year. Business Development Bank of Canada deems us a nation of entrepreneurs. It claims that our economy is unequivocally dependent on small and mid-sized businesses. SMEs account for 90% of all private sector jobs and 55% of our GDP. Yet, our only other federal program targeting entrepreneurs is the Startup Visa program that has a backlog of more than 6,000 applications with processing times well more than 32 months. This is a joke for time-sensitive and incredibly risky, innovative ventures who we want to come to Canada and become the next Shopify, the next Google, the next Facebook. No wonder passport shoppers are way more interested in this program than genuine entrepreneurs. On the provincial side, things are not any better. Look at our most popular, populous, and economically prosperous province of Ontario. Its entrepreneur program has had only 2 nominations in the 7 years since its inception. Things are even worse with our family reunification and humanitarian programs. Madam Chair, and members of the committee, backlog is a product of our immigration strategy, and our immigration strategy must be a function of who Canada is and who Canada wants to become. It takes more than just one ministry in the government. It even takes more than the entire government itself. It takes all Canadians. Therefore, I recommend that Parliament legislates to mandate IRCC to institutionalize public participation in its policy making, such that civil society and all other stakeholders can effectively be engaged in sourcing ideas, co-creating solutions, and tackling complex policy problems like our current backlog. I further recommend that in the interim, processing of certain immigration applications be outsourced to certain Canadian professionals under well-defined public-private collaboration frameworks and robustly monitored service contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, now we will go into our round of questioning, and we will start our first round with Mr. Kimmick. Mr. Kimmick, you can please begin. You will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, my question will be to Mr. Shekarian. That was just a breath of fresh air. Thank you, sir, for saying all the things I've been thinking for several years now. You talked about, you talked basically like an engineer, saying there is no box, and that we should rethink the way we do things. And I was going through the departmental plan and comparing past results to current results. And you talked about the targets that we have in the immigration system solely based on targets, not results. And I wonder if you could explain this from an engineer's point of view. If you pour in 30% more people, so the department has grown since 2016 by 30%, more people doing more work, all the while the backlogs have grown more and more and more. What would you make of it?
By adding more people to the department? Are we expecting that the processing times would be better? This department is a black box. We don't know how it works. We don't know how it operates. I mean, as a lawyer, we file ATIP after ATIP just to get the most basic information. We don't know. The most recent thing that we know based on LexSpace is that the department back in COVID, it was at 80% capacity at best. So I don't know if they're hiring 30 new, if they're growing by 30%. I don't know how those resources are allocated.
Do you think that putting in even more people will help the department meet any of its targets, or actually reduce these
Not
backlogs?
necessarily. Not necessarily. It's not about quantity, it's about quality.
So on that quality question, throughout the federal government, throughout the public service right now, a lot of people are electing to work from home. There's a code in the public service that's code 699 as well. Do you think that's having an impact with people not having their files available? This happens to me quite often. I have a case file manager in my office, Suki, who handles these. And oftentimes she is told on the phone that particular person can't be in the office, doesn't have access to a paper file. And it seems like nobody can go into that person's office to scan the file or take a picture on the phone to send it to another visa officer to continue the processing. How often does that happen to you?
That happens every day. I mean, we don't know now, but my colleagues you've heard testimony after testimony in this very committee. And we said back in COVID, officers should have been essential workers. They just left. I have a startup visa application. We submitted on paper, and then a year and a half, we don't even have an acknowledgement. This is not respectful to those people that we want to become the future of Canada. So this is actually happened in the ground. We don't know if it's still happening.
So the backlogs are also causing officers to sometimes not process files of deserving individuals who are fleeing countries with horrible human rights records. And I'm going to think of the country of Iran. I think you're very familiar with it. I have a lot of Kurdish friends from Raja, who I file a lot of access to information requests on their behalf for their files. You've said before that Canada has laid the red carpet for embezzlers like Kavari and torturers like the ex-police chief of Talay, while we're also refusing 70% of its students and imposing sanctions on persons and entities with no interest in Canadians. I think I saw it on your LinkedIn. I liked it so much that I kept it. I entirely agree with you. What more do you think Canada could do to make sure these types of individuals aren't allowed to come to Canada, and that we do right by Canadians with Iranian heritage, with Kurdish heritage, who see this going on? And I get sent messages almost every single week of people telling me so-and-so from Sanandaj or Mahabad or Kermanshah is being allowed into the country, but they have links to the regime, and they're intimidating people once they get here, or intimidating the families who are back in their countries of origin, and they don't feel safe in the Canada that they call home.
I agree. To me, integrity is when you say something, you got to abide by it, and I don't see it in the treatment that we have to what's happening in Iran right now. We allow people who don't deserve it, and then here's the double standard that we have. Ukraine happens, Afghanistan happens, and Iran happens. With Iran, we're saying, we added some names to some lists that we're not allowing people to come into this country, that they never even thought about coming to this country to begin with. Instead, we could have said, hey, we're going to lay a red carpet for whoever is on the streets and doing protests. We let you to come here, be in a free country, you have the media, talk to the media, and cause some change to that country. So instead, we're doing something that I don't think has any benefit.
Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
You have 1.5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Shekarian, you also talked about the backlog for entrepreneurs, people who want to come to this country and invest in our economy, create more jobs. That was the experience of my family when we came here. My family wanted to give back. My mother started a business. It was very simple, just commercial cleaning of homes and commercial cleaning of restaurants. You talked about the 42-month wait time. My staff often have to go online and check what the wait time is before we take on a case file to see if we can reasonably actually fix the problems people have. How often do you actually refuse people and say, like, this wait time is just too long, you're never going to get a response in time for a marriage or a birth of someone, or, you know, you're not going to be able to reconstitute your family? How often does that happen to you?
For my practice, we focus on business immigration a lot, and that's the biggest part of our business. And when you're a business person, you accumulate wealth, you have expertise, you want to take it to a new home, and we treat you the way we treat you. It has happening in the last year. We had 3 clients who turned to Australia to take their businesses to Australia because they have a much easier and much more friendly system for entrepreneurs. Our immigration system is not entrepreneur friendly, despite the statistics that I gave you. BDC deems us a nation of entrepreneurs, and yet look at how we treat them.
Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep. Mr. Brunel Desep, you will have 6 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please begin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that we've heard very good witnesses today. All testimonies were very good, as well as the answers. Everything is relevant. We can see that people are really working on the field, and this is going to help us with our report. Mr. Shekarian, you said that targets are not going to help with the backlog. It's more a question of helping people settle here, how they are being accepted here. Do people make a link between the labor shortage and new residents? Of course, these people also need lodging. They need public services. They will eat. Is it really a solution to increase targets and think that everything is going to get better with labor shortage?
We give to IRCC goes to settlement programs. If you look at how they're spending it at GC Info Base, that's the website I looked at on how they're spending the money. But then at the same time, I'm just going to read you from a university study that went to the NGOs that are delivering these settlement programs on ground, and they're all saying that IRCC, when they consult with us, they have answered the question before and then they come to us. So there is no meaningful, collaboration between civil society and the government. And that is exactly what I'm asking for. You're spending most of your money on settlement. And what is settlement good for? Because whoever we bring to this country, we want to stay in this country. Right? Right now, our retention rate, 2 weeks ago, you heard testimony, 50% of people are leaving. We're doing something wrong. We are definitely doing something wrong. And we're spending most of our money on something that we should help people stay here, but nobody's consulting us, civil society or not consulted.
Justement, vous parlez.
You were talking about consultation earlier in your testimony. You also talked about the lack of transparency and communication with the department. How does that impact your work? How does that impact what we are studying here? That means backlogs.
In terms of my capacity as a lawyer, I'm like a mechanic, right? You give me the law, I want to apply it, and I want information. So when a client comes to me with a refusal, the first thing that I would do is file an ATIP, and then I have to wait months, and then I'll come knocking on your door. Hey, do a follow-up with IRCC. You have no luck. You heard this testimony from my colleague last week, Chantal Deloche, that said the exact same thing. Transparency itself, yes, there are a lot of values with transparency, but transparency on its own is not something that we're after. Transparency is the very first thing that we need to do. When a system is transparent, I can look at it, I can analyze it, and I can make recommendations based on what I'm seeing. We are still at the transparency level. Testimony after testimony, just do a control F on whatever you have on paper, and you see how many times this issue has come up. Where are we right now?
Oui, OK.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. We were talking about transparency. Some witnesses have suggested to register, to tape interviews. Do you think this is a good idea? Microphone. Okay.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, taping interviews is definitely better than not taping them. Same again, my colleague who has much more experience than I have, I think she started practicing immigration law before I was even born, and that's what she said. Taping, there is no reason for not taping them. I'm referring to Mr. Deloitte's testimony.
Merci. Monsieur Rai, vous avez dit...
We will now proceed to our second round, and we will have Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask Mr. Kayam, some witnesses have suggested that the department mass approve whole categories of low-risk applications. We talked about that today. The suggestion is that this would reduce our backlog with very minimal risk to Canada. Now, in your opening remarks, you talked briefly about this, and I heard you say the words unintended consequences, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this.
Well, that's right. If we think about it, if we were going to mass approve a number of applications, we'd have to consider what would happen. I think something like that would only cause more uncertainty and unpredictability in the system and lead to unanticipated consequences. So let's say 2.7 million applications got approved overnight. Well, then the second question is, how are you going to issue all those PR cards, those citizenship certificates and those permits? How are you going to print them off so quickly? And then let's say those permanent residents want to travel home to visit their family, then you're going to have a jam at the airport, and then you're going to have another traffic jam at the airport for PR landings. So those unintended consequences have to be considered. That's why predictability and certainty and consistency, I think those are important values in the rule of law. I think what we should do is work backwards. What is the top speed that we can approve applications at? How many work permits can be approved? How fast? Or how many PR cards or citizenship certificates can be issued per year, per month, per week, per day, and per hour? And then working backwards from there and setting a target, that would make sense. What's the Donovan Bailey of the system, right? Of the immigration system? How fast can we go? And then we figure out, well, how can we be Terry Fox at the same time and find a middle ground, maybe 60% of our top speed. Once we know those types of things, I think it's a little bit easier to understand what unanticipated consequences are going to be. Ramming people through, that could work, right? But
that's good. Mr. Shekarian, just wondering if you have any additional or different thoughts on that.
I think it would send a wrong message. Let's just create a lottery and be proud of it. U.S. had lotteries, and they were straightforward about it. Imagine you're applying to Canada today, and then you realize if you've done it 6 months ago, you would have gotten in with no trouble.
So I just want to switch gears a little bit and speak again, or speak about the judicial review process. Other witnesses have spoken about this, and people say there needs to be something done. You guys are lawyers. I'm curious of your thoughts. Some have suggested scrapping it altogether in favor of Immigration Canada working more cooperatively, and others say that IRCC seems incapable of being cooperative, and maybe we need a judge to get through this.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Reddycop. Your time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Al-Khouri. Mr. Al-Khouri, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please begin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to our witnesses. Thank you for testifying before our committee. My first question is for Mr. Rai. Mr. Rai, IRCC uses advanced analytics to process visitors' visa and to go through study permits and work permits, as well as sponsorship requests for spouses. Are you able to specify to us the benefits of these tools, the benefits on those who are making the requests?
Without having knowledge of what kind of algorithm they're using to make these decisions, it's very hard to say, is it just something like a generic a form that they go through, or are they actually using some sort of AI to make these decisions? So it's very hard to answer that question without having more specific knowledge, which I don't have on that subject. I'm sorry.
Mr. Shekarian, according to your knowledge of the situation and according to your experience as a lawyer in this field, what is your opinion as to online applications? Do you think this would help to speed up requests being made?
Of course. It's a good thing. We should have done it a long time ago. But then it's one thing to launch an MVP, most viable product, and not have resources be able to back up all the troubleshooting and everything that can go wrong with the system, than not doing it. So doing everything online is, of course, we have to do it, but we have to make sure that we dedicate enough resources to this system to troubleshoot it. Because look at it, right now all the applications are online. IRCC is pushing for it, but just look at the CPA listserv or look at CLAW listserv. There is everyday frustration from many lawyers across this country saying, hey, this portal doesn't work, that doesn't work, this error message, I don't know what to do with it. And nobody's responsive.
Thank you. Monsieur Madani,